parents, the child goes to the teacher who will guide that child. What do you mean by external moral authority? You use that expression a lot. Materialism has to do with when you are Hello, I bid you a very warm welcome to the course in Values and Spirituality. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, I strongly encourage you to listen to all the other episodes in which we covered all of the course material contained in book number 1. From this episode, we will be focusing on book number 2. I would invite you to do the following. What you do with this course material and what you make of the study material is entirely up to you. In this course, there are no exams. This course is not for a qualification, but for a life purpose. By this we mean your practical life. You are invited to use this course material to scrutinize your life with the aim of modifying your character. We invite you to create your own set of values and develop the power and skill to live by them. I would like to introduce you to Sister Denise, who is the author of this series of 8 books and who is kind enough to share with us her wisdom and insight into not just what is contained in the text, but the deeper meaning behind it. Sister Denise, I bid you a very warm welcome to book number 2.
Thank you.
I'm sure the readers have felt deeply enriched after going through the contents of book number 1, and I'm sure they're eagerly anticipating this lecture as well as what is contained in the rest of this book. So on their behalf, I bid you a very warm welcome.
Thank you very much.
Sister Denise, the first thing that I'd like to ask you is, could you tell the viewer what the difference is between religion and spirituality?
This book 2 is really looking at the fundamental origins of values. And people normally consider that values, moral and ethical values, arise in religion. And it's true that they do. What we also saw in the book number 1 is that there are these streams of cultural bedrock out of which values arise. One of them is the religions. Another one is secular values, which we'll also be looking at in this book. Spirituality is a third energy. We can differentiate between religion and spirituality like this: that religion is generally considered to be the exoteric aspect, which involves rituals, buildings, external visible signs and symbols, so that people can recognize what religion somebody belongs to by their dress, by their behavior, by their festivals, all of these things. And spirituality is to do with the deepest inner attributes. And one of the reasons that we favor spirituality is because it underlies all the religions, and it even underlies non-religion. Those who classify themselves as atheists still give a lot of importance to spiritual characteristics and qualities, but they don't use the word spiritual for it, they use the word human. Then you have the secular, and a lot of what happened in the world after the different revolutions that took place 17th, 18th, 19th centuries is that religion was seen to be an instrument of tyranny. And because of that, it was rejected, and systems of governance based on the principle of secularism arose. And secularism was interpreted in a number of different ways accordingly. So we're going to be looking at these three strands in a lot more detail as we go through book number 2 to see this underpinning bedrock of how we are going to individually work out our value systems.
What I was curious about is why is it important that the distinction is drawn between the two at the commencement of the book?
Well, partly it's because people have preconceptions. Some people think that religion and spirituality is the same thing. Other people think religion and spirituality are opposite each other. Some people think spirituality is some different type of thing, which is not to do with religion or secularism, and is a vague thing. Some people think that religion means a specific religion, and that spirituality is a claim that lies beneath all religions, and they don't accept that there can be anything, but they really focus on the distinctions between the religions. So I think the main important reason why we're distinguishing this here is we have to set out our terminology, our terms of reference, so that it's absolutely clear what we mean by religion, what we mean by spirituality, what we mean by secularism.
I would now like to take you to what is contained on page 11 of Module 2. It reads, "The great religions of the world originate in spiritual enlightenment. Therefore, the search for values must involve a return to spiritual roots." That is quite deep. Could you elaborate?
If you think of the great religions of the world, Islam, Judaism, Christianity, Hinduism, Buddhism, on the whole, we would say that they arose around 2,000 to 2,500 years from now ago. The world was a very different place, and people were thinking in quite different ways. These great religions arose at a time of great spiritual enlightenment, and the Christ, the Buddha, Abraham, all of these people were not the only ones. There was quite a large number of very powerfully motivated, enlightened people, and a few of them became recognized as the founders of the great religions of today. Now, the other thing that happened is that those religions were not religions at the time of the religious founder. They became consolidated into religions once they acquired a political presence.
What does that mean, political presence?
That means where the religion became the state religion of a particular country. For example, Christianity became the state religion of the Roman Empire at a certain point in time. And it was only then that it took off as a religion. And I think there's a very important discussion to be had about the relationship between the religion and the state. So about 300 to 400 years after the origins of the great religions of the world today, that is when they became consolidated with the state, and then you got the government, secular and religious governments operating together to take care of the countries. Then later on, in around the 17th century, it was found that the religions took a position that was considered tyrannical, And then you got a split between the state and religion, and this is where the secular republic idea took off, so that there was definitely a separation of religion and state. This you see very clearly in United States. The American Constitution makes that very clear separation. In France also, a very clear separation which is described in the Constitution. And these two constitutions which separate the religion and the state became the underpinnings of the Indian Constitution, which was set up around 1954. And so India determined to be a secular republic. And one of the reasons was that in India it's a very multi-faith civilization, community, where there are, obviously, Hinduism is the majority religion, but the minorities of Islam, Christianity, Jainism, Buddhism, and so on, they're very sizable communities. And the Muslim community in India is the largest in the world outside Pakistan. So it's very sizable. And so India needed to give an egalitarian voice to the different religions and cultures. And this is why it decided to set up as a secular republic.
You go on to say, attempts to develop values in the name of secularism have failed, yet we cannot exclude this rich source. Could you tell us more about this?
The philosophers, moral philosophers of the 18th and 19th centuries had to deal with this split between the religion and state. And they had to really sit down and figure out, if religion is not the basis of values, then what is? And so they started thinking about humanism, what it means to be a human being, to try to define why life is sacred, why the different qualities and virtues are part of humanity independently of religion. So there was a lot of work done to define the origin of values as coming not from the religions, but something independent of the religions, perhaps an antecedent of the religions, because they said, well, human beings came first and then came religions. And so we can go back before religions. And, you know, both of these angles have their validity, and they also encounter problems. And the problems that are contained within these two angles on the origins and cultivation of values is what we're having to deal with now. So my thesis is that over time, as the different principles were applied and you saw how it played out, and looking at the historical record, we see that regardless of whether you use religion as your base of values or secularism as your base of values, you still have a crisis of values. And so this then causes us to have to rethink the whole thing. And this is why this is a very, very interesting juncture, and it was what made it very interesting to be given the task of writing about this. You really have to think about it.
Sister Denise, I just want to enlighten the viewer as to the following. Book number 2 is comprised of 3 units. Unit 1 is entitled How to Develop Spirituality and Values, from page 13. Unit 2, Challenges to Your Spirituality and Values, from page 47. And Unit 3, Religion, Spirituality and Secularism, from page 93. I have a question for you as far as Unit 2 is concerned. It reads, Unit 2 is entitled Challenges to Your Spirituality and Values. The challenges addressed in this unit include the social, cultural, religious, intellectual and personal obstacles that come in front of anyone who wishes to change, develop themselves spiritually and base their lives on a stronger foundation of values. That caught my attention more than the other two, simply because people do not like to be challenged. So how does one go about doing this?
You're right. People don't like to be challenged. Everybody likes things to be easy. But what we're doing here is really very fundamental. So I think the kind of person who will be interested in doing this study is a person who has questions like, what's happening to the world, what's going on, why are we facing what we're facing? And they're really looking for answers. If you start there and you say, okay, the answer lies in developing your spirituality, fair enough. And once you start to do that, a lot of things will come in your way. And I think it's fair enough to say to people, okay, you really want to understand the answers, you really want to understand the question in depth, and you yourself are not neutral in this. Now, each and every one of us is on some level part of the problem.
That makes it even more difficult to swallow. It takes, I'm not saying that you're wrong. You're obviously not wrong, but what I'm saying is that it takes a lot to be able to digest that.
I think it's not a new idea to suggest that we are part of the problem, but to face it in a systematic way may be a little bit new. Society is not them. Usually a person kind of keeps themselves on one side, nothing wrong with me, it's all them. Now in this, we're seeing that we have to see things in a holistic way, and we also have to accept, well, I am part of this holistic picture, and that means what I am and what I have become has had a big impact on it, and therefore what I do to myself is going to be very much part of the solution. And when you're looking at things in a holistic way, you also find yourself looking at the microcosm of the individual and the impact on the macrocosm of the wider picture. And so the challenges are definitely going to be internal just as much as they are external. And this is why we have to do a spiritual practice in order for there to be any difference within the actual personal self.
As you speak, a strange thought came to mind. I just realized that this is kind of being in a hospital for souls, not bodies, and the patient is also the doctor, or the doctor is also the patient.
One of the things you find in holistic medicine is that the patient must be part of the healing process. Otherwise, in the other system, you just say to the doctor, okay, fix the problem. It's nothing to do with me. The body is sick, fix it. And in holistic medicine, the doctor will say, well, the problem is there because you created it. So you must be part of the healing process. And the same thing applies here. There's a different way of looking at it.
Okay, you go on to say at the top of page 12, you will be tested by resistances from your old ways, and negativity has a stronger hold than you might expect. These challenges are necessary because they strengthen your character and resolve and bring to your attention areas of weakness and susceptibility. Tell us how one does this and keep your sanity.
In many ways, embarking on a course like this presupposes that you need to be strong, and if you're not strong, get strong. This is not for the weak, not for the frail.
And not for the faint-hearted.
Right. Well, because it's, in many ways, it's a course in leadership.
Okay.
Because a person who does this automatically is in a position of being a role model, which makes you a leader. People will be looking at you. Anybody who does something a little differently, well, people scrutinize them, because on the one hand, people in general don't like differences, they like conformity, but on the other hand, things are not working so well, so they're looking for some solution. So if somebody does something different, there's an ambivalent relationship with them. On the one hand, you want to take them out because they're different, and on the other hand, well, they might be part of the solution, so you look at them. So both of these angles are going on. You will be under scrutiny from other people, and also the parts of yourself that are part of the problem will come up and face you and try to prevent you from moving ahead. You know, your ideals are very different from your reality, and you will be confronted with that, and you have to work through it. And this is why a lot of personal work is part of this.
Well, since you put it like that, I think we should continue. Thank you so much for giving us your time and wisdom. We've reached the end of the introductory episode to book number 2. Sister Denise has taken us through what the units are about. There are 3 of them, the difference between religion and spirituality. And I think what sits the deepest with me from today's discussion is that you will be required to face your own ego, take it apart, and actually rebuild yourself to the person that you would like to be. And I really enjoyed what Sister Denise said is at the end of this journey, the prize is worth it. In other words, you, the real you, is worth it. So I do hope that you will be joining us for the rest of book 2. I look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care. Thank you, Sister Denise.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us. Take care and goodbye.